Hey guys, happy Sunday. Welcome back to Speaking360. Listen, sorry I missed you last week. We were away running a 2-day intensive speaker retreat in Oklahoma for the Folds of Honor organization out there. And so we didn't get back until late on Sunday nights. Didn't have a chance to get a video to you last week. So I'll try and make up for it today. And we're talking about something that is very powerful and easy to misunderstand, because we're talking about the importance of vulnerability, using vulnerability as a communicator. When it works very well, and when you want to be careful, when it doesn't work, or when it can completely undermine your efforts at influence. And that's the first thing I think we want to just acknowledge, is that we interact with other human beings all the time, don't we? We're doing it all the time. We're always interacting with other human beings. And pretty much every single one of those influence attempts, every one of those communications, is an attempt to influence. We're always trying to influence the other person. And it can be very direct, where we're telling them to do something, or we're saying, you shouldn't have done that. Why did you do that? You mustn't do that. Or it can be very subtle. Just like raising the eyebrows. Or maybe it's like shake of the head, or maybe even subtler, just like rolling your eyes to heaven. It can be any of those things, can't it? So it can be very direct, or it can be very subtle. It can be verbal, or it can be non-verbal. And sometimes even, we try and influence people unconsciously. We don't even realize we're doing it. But most of our interactions with other people are attempts at influence. Now, if we want to reliably get good at this, then we need a foundation. We need a connection with the audience. So that's like the foundation of influence. And vulnerability can work very well for this. So vulnerability is a great way to connect with the audience, because the audience empathizes with us. But if we're not careful, it can undermine our efforts to influence them, because there's three key foundations to influence. But the first one, being connecting, as I said, is the first and most important. But then after we've got that connection, we do need to establish our own credibility. Now, we also need to be relevant, but we'll come back to that. I'm just talking about these two together here, because if we're not careful, vulnerability can be very connecting, but it can also injure our credibility with the audience. So we've got to be careful how we use it. So I always say, you want to be vulnerable, but don't be stupid with the audience. That's why I use that picture of the cat and the mouse. Because if the mouse says to his other mouse friends, look, this war that's been going on with the cat, we've got to put an end to this. I'm just going to go out there. I'm going to be very vulnerable. I'm going to connect with the cat, and I'm going to see if I can just stop this once and for all. So the cat goes out there, and what happens? The mouse goes out there, the cat eats it. That's stupid. The cat's a cat. The cat's going to eat the mouse. We're not talking about being stupid like that. We're not talking about getting eaten. People often say to me, yeah, I'm going to be vulnerable. I'm going to be real. I'm going to be authentic. I'm not going to do any preparation. No, that's not what I'm saying at all. You want to honor your audience, honor their precious time, do your very best to bring as much value as you can to your time with them. So I'm not talking about that at all. I'm talking about being vulnerable in a way that helps you, not that gets you eaten. So this quote by Larry Wilson actually sums this up quite nicely. He said, they'll respect you for your wins, but they'll love you for your failures. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about using your failures, the mistakes you've made, being human. You're being real with the audience, but in a way that helps you and them. So sharing what you've learned from your mistakes can be a great way to be vulnerable with the audience. You're not pretending to be perfect. You're not pretending that everything goes well. You're saying, no, I've messed up. But you're doing it in a way that helps you and not holds you back. So what we're looking for really is, what have you learned from experience? What have you lived through? What have you learned from experience? And so ideally we want interesting experiences that you've had, that you've learned something insightful from. So it can work well, and these gives us the things to avoid as well, actually. It can work well when you're talking about a different area. So by that I mean, if you're talking about, let's say, speaking, let's say overcoming fear of speaking as an example. So you're speaking to the audience, and your job is to help them believe, for them to see that they can overcome their fear of speaking. Now, if you're like standing up there and you're shaking and and you're talking to your feet, you can overcome your fear of speaking, then they may think, oh, bless him, look, he's terrified. And they may empathize with you and they may connect with you and they may have a warm feeling for it. But they're obviously thinking, yeah, you're not the right person to help me, though, because if it's not working for you, what are the chances it's going to work for me? So it needs to be in a different area. So if you were talking about, well, let's use overcoming fear of speaking as an example. You're talking about overcoming fear of speaking, but the vulnerability is in a different area, like you're hopeless at DIY or something, and that was somehow relevant to a story you're sharing. Or you're always late. Then maybe those two can coincide. You can share your vulnerability and how stupid you were and the mistakes you made and what you maybe learned from them in one area, but it doesn't affect your ability to, because you're coming across as strong and confident and certain about what you're doing, and you're believable in that role. You see the difference? So if it's in a different area, that can really work well. Or ideally at a different time. So let's say, we'll stick with the overcoming the fear of speaking. Let's say we're talking about overcoming fear of speaking, and you talk about a time when you really didn't, weren't able to do this. You really struggled with this. And it was a time in the past, and you talk about some of your struggles, and then they can relate to your journey because the things you're talking about that you had to deal with, they're dealing with now. But you found a way through, which is what you're sharing with them. So you've grown through this experience. So you're vulnerable in the past, but now you've grown through it. So you understand. You've been there. You get it. And so they see that. And so that can really help them to understand what to do and see that maybe they can do it too, because they relate to your experiences. So different area at a different time, something you've lived through, all of these things can work really, really well as ways to use vulnerability. And the opposite of them, of course, is, ways not to use vulnerability. Also, this was something that came out the weekend, no conflict with the objective that you're trying to achieve. So here, talking about the Folds of Honor, they're Gold Star families, so their father or spouse has been injured in the line of duty, or is critically injured or killed in the line of duty. And so the spouse or the children then, some of them go on to speak for the Folds of Honor at different golfing events to raise money. And so we were there with them, helping them with their stories. And there was about 22 of us there. And the stories are really, really powerful that they're sharing. And so it's very emotional for them. Now, for them to be vulnerable in the moment then, where they're, obviously distressed, reliving the loss of a loved one and the impact it had on their life, leading on to how Folds of Honor was able to come and help them, give them these wonderful scholarships that, are life-changing for them. For them to be fragile, fearful, vulnerable in that moment doesn't conflict with what they're trying to achieve, which is basically to say, Folds of Honor was there for us when we really needed it. So there's no conflict there between them being vulnerable and what they're trying to achieve, which is showing the value of the Folds of Honor scholarships. So there's no conflict with the objective, so it works very, very well. It's different to being vulnerable when you're trying to teach overcoming fear of speaking. See the difference? And then also, just finally, this list is not exhaustive, but you'll get an idea of some of the key things to keep in mind. It invokes the power of the underdog. So when you're talking about being vulnerable in a certain area and the odds are stacked against you, then the audience can't help but get behind you as an underdog and root for you in the story or whatever it is that you're sharing, your experiences. So now they're on your side, hoping that you're going to win against the forces of adversity or the forces of evil or unjust. We hate injustice, don't we? So anything like that helps us get behind the speaker. So vulnerability can be really, really powerful, but you don't want to use it in a way that helps you connect with the audience, but then undermines your ability to influence them. John Maxwell often says, standing up and, speaking from the heart can help you, can really endear you to the audience because you're being real, you're vulnerable. But if after 5 minutes no one's taking any notes, you're not helping them. So we need both. We need to be a likable expert. We need the two together. And keep in mind, the mistakes that you've made is to be human. And being human is great common ground. It really is. So great way to connect with the audience, to be very relatable to the audience. That's it for this week. We'll see you next week. Thanks, guys. Take care. Lots of love. Bye-bye. God bless.